Welcome to the KayaCast, the podcast for cannabis businesses looking to launch, grow, and scale their operations.
Ernest, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Tommy. Excited to be here.
So I followed you from afar, and before our call, I was really looking into BIPOCANN and what you guys do, and I love the work. By the way, we work a lot with social equity licensees as well, and there's a huge need in our industry, not just with social equity licensees, on just the overall knowledge of the cannabis industry and as well as cannabis businesses. So can you walk me a little bit? You have a background working with some pretty big trade shows. What was the impetus of stopping what you're doing and starting this business?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I started working in the cannabis industry around 2018 and had a cool opportunity. I was hired to work for MJ Biz, and it was such a great time. Back then, it's crazy when you say back then. It wasn't too long ago, but the state of the cannabis industry was so different. And it sort of felt like companies were making money hand over fist. And because of that, it had attracted so many people from around the world who were interested in trying to get their, start into the industry. So I know you've heard people talk about the green rush, but that's what it felt like. Well, I was working at MJ Biz on their marketing teams. I was in charge of like the international marketing efforts. In 2018, we were launching events in, we hosted our second event in Toronto, and we launched events in Europe and Latin America, as well as hosting the stateside events in New Orleans and Las Vegas, of course. And everything was going great. We were getting thousands of people from all over the world to come to the industry, to big trade shows. And it put me in a position where I was really at the center of it all, working on the marketing team next to the journalists. I learned so much about the industry. I made so many great relationships and understood pretty quickly that we were in an emerging market and industry that was really just at the beginning of its growth stages and potential. And in 2019, 2020, we were really expanding on that work. We expanded on it in 2019, and then in 2020, the pandemic came. So that, puts a lot of folks who are working at MJ Biz and other trade shows in difficult situations because now all of a sudden you can't have in-person events. And the majority of our revenue stream was coming from a big 5-day show in Vegas at the end of the year. So the company had to make some changes. There were some layoffs, there were some furloughs. But it put us in a situation where, I just was like, well, what do I really want to do with my time? There was so much uncertainty around whether we were going to be able to have events anytime soon. And I really wanted to lean into being able to help some of the underrepresented entrepreneurs who were seeking entry into cannabis. So a lot of focus at that time in 2020 was around social equity, and a lot of states were opening up programs which were designed to give access to licenses for those individuals who were negatively and disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. I sort of felt that the policy efforts were cool, but I could see pretty quickly that there was going to be a need for people who already had relationships with business and insiders. And I felt that I could really advance some of those equity efforts by creating a platform that allowed those prospective entrepreneurs to navigate pitfalls, find relationships and education and resources that can really accelerate their growth. And that was the impetus behind it.
Oh, wow. So you started really as the connector platform where you connected entrepreneurs with people that can help them in their journey.
That's right.
How has that evolved to today?
Well, Yeah, you're right. So in the probably first year, maybe first 2 years, the big focus was on like connections and relationships, and I thought it was pretty cool because it for one, it made the platform very valuable because you had a lot of like new license seekers who were trying to find different services that could support their growth. And this same, and meanwhile, you have service providers who are looking for newly licensed businesses that they could connect with. So, you sort of created a platform where I was sort of at the center of that. And because so many of because I had such a strong I had a lot of great connections with ancillary businesses and a lot of service-based businesses, and it felt like all of the social equity programs were really focusing on helping people access licenses, but it wasn't really none of them were really focusing on vetting relationships with people that could really help them and not exploit them. So I ended up finding something that worked. And really within the first couple of years, what was cool is right from the beginning, even though it was more of a connecting platform, I always had that consulting hat on. So whenever I would sit down and meet with someone, I wanted to learn who they were, what their goals are, what their challenges were. So able to like figure out a wealth of information very, very quickly on the best ways to support people over here and people over here. And eventually, in 2022, I had built a relationship with the Cannabis Business Office, which is a division of Colorado's Office of Economic Development. And that business office had announced that they were going to begin offering grants for social equity license holders. And those grants were really, they were going to go up to $50,000. And the whole point was to give them some resources that could help them, get closer to opening up their doors or accelerating their growth. One of the problems that I noticed immediately was they didn't have a lot of additional support. And, it was a small team. They're like, hey, we're going to solve this one problem and give people some money. And I was like, well, once people have those resources, then what? It's like, so I approached them and we had a great conversation and wanted to see how could we actually make those resources go farther while also ensuring that the grant recipients could be in a position where they could, achieve their goals. So started a pilot program with them for about 8 weeks in 2022, had some good results. And ever since then, 2023, we've had an ongoing relationship. And each year I do more and more education and it iterates and we just figure out how to get better and how to meet businesses where they are, whether they're, pre-licensed and trying to navigate that process, or if they're like early stage, just made some revenue, or if they're in a situation where they're a couple of years in, but now trying to figure out how to scale or, potentially find like capital or investors, we can guide them. So it's really, really grown. And it was sort of a natural evolution because after having enough conversations and connection points, I just started to realize what the true needs were that could help business owners, especially the social equity license holders who were trying to get their start.
Well, so you actually help two different types of business in their life cycle. One is the startup, which is a completely different problem than the scale up.
Yeah.
Which one's more fun?
I like the scale up better. To being 100% honest, the startup environment is so fun, right? Because people get this great idea, they're really excited, and it's nice when they can get their MVP, like that minimum viable product, and figure out how to actually make this a reality. But I find that like so many of the connections that I have and the relationships that I have and the resources that are available to really help growth can't be tapped into until those businesses are licensed and generating some revenue. Usually the startups, especially in cannabis, like it's hard to find, but you can't find banking. It's hard to find funding unless you unless they already have a lot of capital or they're like existing backers, every dollar is really being put towards just going through the points to opening the door. So I'm very limited in how I can help accelerate their growth. So once they're at that point where they're starting to make a little bit of money or they met the licensing potential, then we can really fast track them.
So what are the sweet spot for you then, really, if I'm hearing correctly, is after you open the door and let's say you have some type of a retail strategy down, you have a baseline of unit economics, and you're thinking, okay, well, where do I go from here? Is that your sweet spot where you come in and really help businesses step into the next phase of their life?
Well, the sweet spot. Yeah, so maybe a good way to say this is I think it's easier when businesses are. So I think the sweet spot is within the first, 2 years of business. So depending on the type of like cannabis license that you have, you might be farther along. So, if you're applying for a retail license, you're probably spending 18 to 24 months just trying to get through the process of getting approved permits, opening your doors. There's stuff that we can still do to help. Maybe you're looking for like the right POS provider or accounting and marketing. Like there's still ways that it can help, those early stage those early stage entrepreneurs make progress. But let's say you're like a brand, a manufacturer, and your life cycle for, to getting into the market might be a little shorter. Maybe it's 12 months. But once you are in a position where you have your packaging and your products and you're ready to get on the market, that's when I feel like it's a great time to start to work with them on marketing strategy, amplification strategy, you know, depending on where they're located, if we have enough like tentacles and enough reach and relationships, there's times where we can just pick up a phone or do an email intro and say, call a retailer and say, hey, here's somebody that, we really like. We've been working with them. Wanted to see if you can just get on the, if you can meet and sample products. And we found so many people go from, getting products onto markets just because of the relationship, as opposed to them trying to cold call. So we still accelerate and we still value like the community and the connections. But I think that's where I can help people. Like once they're at that point where they are close to opening or right, or ready to start to make sales, like that's when I see like a lot of magic, because we can do so much. They can take them from they can drive their revenue pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, so really businesses that are in position to run. You're in the position, you have things lined up, you're past licensing, you have your doors open. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That is actually a really cool pocket to be in, just to be able to help these startups accelerate their business. What are some problems that you see, or some of the most common problems that you see entrepreneurs face when they've just opened their door and now they're looking to grow?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of challenges that I see, and maybe I'll say like I'm going to split this into general entrepreneurial challenges and entrepreneurial challenges within the cannabis industry. Right? So in general, I think, I see a lot of entrepreneurs when they're getting started, they're really, really excited. Almost like 90, if not 100% of the time, like their projections on how quickly they're going to make revenue are inflated. They think they're going to earn a lot more faster, and they think they're going to spend a lot less. And usually it's the opposite. Everybody is very very excited that their business idea is going to generate a lot of money quickly, and they're very conservative on their expenses, and they need to actually make sh- I think that has been a challenge because I don't know, like it feels like a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize especially like first time entrepreneurs, they just don't know. They
No,
don't-
it was true. You know what's funny? I
yeah.
remember looking at my deck when we first started and how absurd my numbers were. Like, hey, we're gonna hit 10 in the first 4 years and we're gonna do this, and the reality kind of slaps you in the face as you go along.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I'd say the other thing is if you're in like a B2B environment, just like so much of your revenue could be dependent on other like business cycles. And there's just more people that you have to build relationships with. And it typically, I've seen that the sales cycles and processes take longer as opposed to like if you're, B2C or direct to consumer.
Mhm.
I think within cannabis, like some of the biggest challenges, honestly, are out of people's controls. It could be like they could do everything right at the state level and get all of like the licensing done. Let's say you have a brick and mortar location. It could be a retailer or a hospitality lounge, a cultivation, and you've done everything right at the state level to get all your licenses. But then you find out that at the city or municipal level, there's some changing regulation that is going to affect your start time to open. And you might think that everything's on track, and then all of a sudden you're delayed by another 3 months, and you have additional costs for improvements. And it's those types of things too that I think are very difficult for new entrepreneurs in cannabis. I think from the outside looking in, people think, okay, I want to get a retailer I want to be a dispensary owner. This is going to make so much money. And maybe they have never heard of 280E and the tax code. They don't understand all of the different challenges related to local state taxes, what you can and can't write off. And from the outside looking in, it seems like a really cool thing to do, but then they don't really understand like the numbers and literally like what is needed for them to break even, let alone make a profit. Yeah, so those are some of the challenges that I see. But I think, something that is also I think something that's also difficult is, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, you just have to have a certain level of risk that most people, you know, aren't really, a lot of people aren't prone to, and and you have to continue to grind, and you always have to have like this mindset where, you got to show up, you got to keep going when things, even if things don't, work out, because things will not always work out. There's always a grind. There's always something that comes up. I can tell you about so many nightmares that I've faced, but
You got to be a crazy person that likes solving problems.
yeah, that's very, very important. Yeah, you gotta you gotta solve problems, but you also can't be unfazed, and if when things go wrong. And one of the things that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs miss, and I think it's a value that we have added through our mentorship and accelerator programs, is community and support system. Because when you're out on your own, especially if you're a solo founder, you're in your head all the time. So, if you're having a couple of bad days or weeks or months, it can be really easy for you to put on the blinders and not realize either a like what's the impact that you're making, what's the progress that you're making, and how can and to be able to look at something objectively. So I think that finding, a peer group, a support group, some mentors is really, really important. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of new entrepreneurs face because they just don't know. Yeah.
You know what? There's one common challenge that I find retailers go through is the when you're exactly what you said. the store build out is always going to take longer than what you expect. Expect 6 months longer. So 6 months, whatever you plan, add another 6 months to it, and that's probably about right. It could be even longer depending on where you are, right? There's a million things that do go wrong during the build out. Just count on that. But what I find that's very consistent is a lot of entrepreneurs put all of their attention in the build out and not a lot of attention to the first 6 months after the build out. And that's consistent across the board. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of time that you can have during the build out to really plan post that milestone. But the build out is the start of the race, right? And oftentimes that's, the mentality is that's the end of the race until the next chapter, but the next chapter happens the next day. And if you're not prepared for that, it can really hit you hard.
That's real. I'm glad you said that. I've seen this happen. Yeah, that's really, really common. And there's actually like a good, now a good friend. But I remember when I met him like 3 years ago, I was asking questions related to marketing and outreach and how to, help him get into a position to build a brand. And he was very, very diligent. His response was, all I can focus on right now is, completing the construction and my cultivation. That's where I want to put my attention. And I would try to push, but he's like, no, I got to do this. And did a good job. He got it finished. But then he came back and was like, I have no idea where to start. People aren't buying. And I'm thinking, if we had attacked the brand building and the outreach, how cool would it have been for you to already have demand and people that were already ready to work with you when you had your doors open. But, but yeah, that's a common.
So what would be your advice to an entrepreneur on how to section off priorities and time during this phase of their business?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging because usually when you're starting out, you're wearing all the hats and, how do you figure out like which one to attack? And I do think that, like if you can put, like if you're just getting starting and let's say it's going to take 2 years for you to open up your retail or your cultivation, like just what you said, like if you can put yourself in, okay, I know I'm just starting out today, but I want to pretend as if, like next week I'm going to be open, like, or put yourself in that mindset where you're like, all right, it's 2 years from now. What are the things that I want to have ready to do? And then just start working backwards. It's like, okay, you don't have to do it all at once, but like it's sort of like working out. If you do like a little bit each day, then you're going to see gradual effects over time. But if you put it off and then all of a sudden like you want to go from have immediate changes in a day, it's just not going to happen. So you can, I'd say, just find a way to do a little bit at smaller intervals, and it doesn't have to be a daily thing. But even if you're like, okay, weekly, I want to dedicate 1 hour towards big picture marketing strategy. And that should be, an easy enough or small enough lift. And, over the course of two years, if you did just like 1 hour a week, you would have given yourself over 100 hours of work on your marketing strategy. So it compounds. Yeah.
How far should somebody plan their goals, Ernest? So let's say you mentioned big picture marketing strategy. What should be the outcome that somebody is looking to achieve, and how far out should they look at that stage in their business?
Do you mean like when they're like just getting started?
Yeah, just getting started. They're in the phase right now where they're building out their location, and they're starting to now tackle. Okay, I know that I have this build that I got to take care of, and it has to happen. But I want to think through about maybe branding, about marketing, or even an outbound sales effort. What does that look like? When should someone plan for that, and how far out should they really have their goals set?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think and I can't just give like an absolute answer here because it's really going to vary based off of like the type of business and also like the type of person, that you are. And I think that In general, I think it's a good idea to have at least like a goal for, the next 6 months to 1 year, and anything under that, it's like, okay, what are like the immediate things I need to take care of? Because people are usually thinking, okay, like I'll tackle the short-term goals. I got to get this done, in the next 10 days, next 30 days. But if you can give yourself a little bit more runway and say, all right, what's my 6 months goal for here? What's my 1 year goal for here? And write those down. And I think, and really, like, I would encourage people to have quarterly goals, because then at the beginning of each quarter, you can sort of say, here's what I want to accomplish. And then at the end of the quarter, you can say, did I do it? And what are the goals for next quarter? And if you sort of dialogue that, sort of not dialogue, but if you track it, then you're going to see what that progress looks like over time.
I love that you mentioned that, because
Yeah.
quarterly goals is long enough for you to be strategic, but short enough for you to measure results. So it's right in that sweet spot where you can see movement and still be strategic.
Yeah, I like that too, because, and like you said earlier, like the industry is so cyclical. And I mean, it took me years to figure out like the business cycles and what worked for my, business. But, like if you're a cultivator, then there's a season where you're going to be spending more time on, the crop and the grow. And, maybe during that time, in the lead up, to that, like when you're post harvest and it's like the end of the year, that might be a great time for you to really double down on your outreach strategy, so that, um, you know, you're ready to go for like the upcoming season and the upcoming crop. It's the same thing like when you look at some of your other goals. Like if you really want to focus on networking or finding connections, and you're plugged into a conference, into the scene, so many of the conferences happen in the fall. So use like those slower summer months, for example, to make sure that you are putting your efforts towards what you need to do to attract the people that you're looking for, vendors, partners, etc. So that could be tougher for a brand new, entrepreneur. So somebody who gets a license today, or who decides like tomorrow that they want to get into the industry. They don't know the cycle, um, but um, but they can still, have those quarterly or year long goals, and start tracking their progress towards them.
You know what I found that a lot of early entrepreneurs make them, and when I say a lot of early entrepreneurs, I mean even or everybody, myself included, when we first started our business, was when we started creating OKRs or goals. Right, you go 1 year, you reverse engineer it back to a quarter, and then you reverse engineer that back to months, and then 2 weeks. Was that we were very ambitious with the number of things that we can get done, and we allocated too less time going deep into the most important things. Just like the Warren Buffett T model, right? Where he says, whatever your goal is, list out 20 things that you think will get you to your goal, force rank it 1 to 20, do the top 5, and make sure you forget about the last 15, because you don't have time for that. Are there any exercises that entrepreneurs can do when they're setting out their goals to better force rank what's the most impactful to their business, and then measure that impact so that they know that they're walking towards the right direction?
Oh, that's a great question. And let me think about that for a second.
It's a big one. And
Yeah.
I always say that entrepreneurship it's a game of infinite problem solving. That's the game that you're in. So just know that you're in a game of infinite problem solving. So there's a million problems for you to solve, and where you make your money is to figure out which problems are worth solving, which problems are worth your time and your resources. And
Yeah.
when I see successful entrepreneurs that are not successful, it really comes down to that: is unsuccessful entrepreneurs solve problems that do not impact their business.
Yep.
or they're not effective at solving problems that do impact the business. I guess those are
Yeah, yeah.
the two parts of that equation.
Yeah, yeah, and but to your point, like the exercise is trying to figure out what are the things that are impacting and driving. So I'm really big on measuring. I like data. I think that it's it's great to I don't record everything, but I sort of got to a point where as time passed, it's like, all right, the things that are really important that I know or drive the business are the things that I'm going to spend more time recording. But to your point, it's like when I got started, I didn't know what was actually creating the biggest impact. I sort of had to figure that out on my own. One thing I will say is that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are like they just see opportunity everywhere, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because a lot of times the things that are most impactful to your business are the mundane, boring, day-to-day things that you need to do. But that is not exciting, and it's mundane, and it doesn't give you the dopamine rush that a new opportunity, So I see a lot of a lot of what do you call it, like the golden ticket,
Yeah.
shiny object, right? Like a lot of entrepreneurs want to have a new idea and chase this, and sometimes you have something that I've seen people who have a business model that is working just fine, and they're either stop doing it or they make unnecessary changes because I want to chase something bigger. And I don't want to say, necessarily deter people from seeking new opportunities, but that's when it could also be helpful to have, a mentor or partner or someone who could look objectively and push back and say, hey, look, from what I see, like these are real positive impacts that are being made. Like you really need to be doubling down on this and before abandoning ship and jumping onto the next thing. So,
Well, it's such a classic problem for entrepreneurs, myself included. Like I put myself in this pool right here, right? Where what makes a really good entrepreneur is seeing an opportunity and having action on it, right? So you see an opportunity, you act, you're a good starter, but that's a double-edged sword because the more successful you get, the more opportunities come your way.
it's true. Yeah.
And you probably see this all the time, where you see a brand that's really successful in the state that they're operating. There's a lot of runway left in their state, but now they're thinking about expanding multi-state. Well, there's a lot of problems when you go across state lines. You have to have new vendors, new everything. Right? And you have so much runway to grow in your state, and you're throwing that away for this new problem that takes a lot of capital and a lot of risk.
Yeah. Yeah. That happens to everyone. It's funny. It's funny because I will say, I can tell you something that worked well for my business, and it's in alignment with what you were just talking about. But uh, when I came onto the scene and announced BIPOCANN and the work that I was doing, like I'd already been doing the work for probably 2 months before I told anybody about it. Like I did the whole lean canvas model. I like I said, it was the middle of the pandemic. We were all working from home. And then just one day I was like, I'm going to rent an Airbnb and I'm going to take 4 days and I'm really just going to be in, like, I gave myself a retreat and I was trying to get like all these ideas out of my head. And I was like, okay, I really spent time trying to address like what the problems were, the unique solution that we could bring, to the market, and really you know, honed on what like our unique strengths were. And for me, it was I had a large network effects. Like that was a big one, and I knew that if I could be authentic about addressing an issue that I felt was being overlooked, and one that was becoming very, very big. Like it was a big problem that, this industry was growing, and the majority of the people who were negatively impacted by it were on the outside looking in and didn't have a shot in ownership. And I was like, policy can help this, but it can only do so much. Like, how can we actually help drive business? And I really, really got super narrow on the problem and figured out how to address it. But, you know, when I started, I was very vocal, and any anytime somebody wanted me to speak or show up on a webinar or a podcast, or if there was a conference, like I was there. So I was traveling everywhere, and I was doing all of the making all the relationships and efforts to be that brand and to support the visibility of it. And as a result, we ended up having a lot of different, members and clients and, stakeholders that we were talking to in different states. And it was, and all I saw was like more problems and more opportunities. And I wanted to like be there to help all of them. And we didn't really get good at what we were doing, in my opinion, until we started to focus on where we were. And I started out very, very wide, very broad, and sort of landscaping the entire country. But when I started working in the backyard in Colorado to see, okay, what are the problems of the local social equity applicants and how can we address that within the community? Then I started wide and ended up going narrow and like deep. And because we've done that, we've gotten so much better at what we do. And I had the shiny object syndrome. Like a couple of years ago, we were applying for out of state RFPs in places where we had been doing community work, and we wanted to bring technical assistance programs there. And then you realize you don't know the politics, and a lot of the politics are really, really bad. And while I was spending time in other places, I was neglecting the needs that were right here. And I feel like we've gotten so much better with helping, folks in Colorado because our focus has primarily been here. And now it's sort of at a point where when people from other markets are reaching out, I think because like we said no to all of the other opportunities for the past couple of years and got really good here, now it's a lot easier for us to go and help. So it's almost like you had to, like we started wide, then went narrow. Now we're starting to go a little bit wider, but more calculated, right?
Yeah, no, I love that because you went deep and truly solved a problem that would needed to be solved versus trying to solve too many problems and end up not really solving any problem.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's the way we resonate with a lot. Definitely resonated with me because when we started out, when you're an entrepreneur and you first start out and really at that survival stage, you're just looking for crumbs. You're just, is somebody going to give me money and for a problem? Like, do I actually have a solution that somebody's going to give me money to solve, right? So you end up solving every problem that comes your way. And, you get to a point where hopefully you can get past that stage and start niching in a little bit more and really go deep with the problems that resonate with you the most.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I've told this to people and like recently, it's like, yeah, if I was starting this business in this industry today, like if I knew how much work I had to put into this thing like 5 years ago when I started, if I knew that, there's no way I would not have started this business.
But there's that naiveness that you have to have when you start a business, right? I feel like that's why a lot of it's hard for people that have gone to become senior managers, senior executives, etc., professors to start a business because they know too much. Right? You kind of know too much of what can go wrong and too many obstacles that can be overwhelming.
And I think that's also what makes it harder for entrepreneurs to go back into the workforce for people too. I think that if you have several years of running a successful business and you've had to like do every single department, it can be difficult when you're going back to a place where folks are, they don't understand just how businesses function at every level. And I
Yeah.
can tell you, like, I used to be somebody that, as middle manager, be critical of supervisors or the owners and decisions that are being made. And it's like you really just don't understand like their perspective until
Yeah.
you're in those shoes and you have to make those decisions. So
Yeah, you can appreciate now that there's always a balancing act that needs to happen when you have to take care of everything, really, and be a little bit more strategic than a single problem. I want to go back to the businesses that you're helping today.
yep.
And you guys are doing such amazing work. What are some of the big problems that you're looking to solve that we haven't spoken about?
Yeah, probably the most commonly cited problem that I hear entrepreneurs, especially equity licensed entrepreneurs, say that they're facing is access to capital and funding. And and that's something that we've been leaning more into, especially like in the programs in Colorado. Like in the beginning of 2025, like we hosted I guess it would have been our fourth mentorship accelerator program. And what was neat about like the one this year was it was a smaller group. It was like 10 businesses, but like 9 out of the 10 were already like revenue producing. And we could have more of like a different focus on what was needed to help them drive more revenue and potentially attract, investors or funds. And what was, and every single one of them still said that like, or the majority of them still said capital was a challenge. So it's one of the things that I think this industry just needs more resources and education around. I know that there are challenges around access to banking and lending. Now, there are some established like cannabis companies that do that. A lot of times, like on the lending, side of things, like you already need to be at certain revenue thresholds, so that can be tough for like the brand new business. But I think what I see is a big challenge is like so many people say like we need capital for this, and let's use an example. New state, the East Coast gives out hundreds of licenses. Everybody like might get a conditional license, and they all need capital. Okay, so now you have like 100 or so businesses that are all saying that they need capital, but and if I'm one person, let's say they're all coming to me, and I'm in
Yeah.
the means to provide that capital. How do you choose, right?
What also, there's a supply and demand imbalance there too. Huge.
Yeah, it's huge. But I think what happens is like so many businesses are they don't understand. Well, I don't want to say they don't understand, but I see that there needs to be more work done on the storytelling,
Yeah.
the problem and the solution, the team, the ways that like differentiate their business, and being able to present in confidence about why someone should buy from them, sponsor them, invest in them. And I think, getting to some of the root of those problems is a challenge that I see that's worth taking on. So I know we're leaning more into that financial education and also trying to strengthen our network of people in the finance, investing, capital world. We're also trying to strengthen relationships with buyers at like retail locations, because so many of like the brands or the cultivators or even like delivery, are trying to find build relationships with decision makers who can actually drive some of that commerce. So yeah, that's a challenge that I see, and it's one that I feel like, we've had some successes with, like earlier this summer, the state had a pitch competition, and they ended up having, dozens of businesses in cannabis apply to participate. There were 8 businesses who had a chance to pitch for like 3 grand prizes, and all 8 of them had participated in my program and in past years. I ended up being asked to advise 2 of them, and the 2 that I advised finished first and third. So
Oh, that's awesome.
one of the businesses won $100,000, and the other won
Oh, that's so
50,000.
cool.
And I basically spent a lot of one-on-one time over the course of 6 weeks, helping them improve and refine their pitch decks and improve their pitch. And there was so much value that came from working with them, because even though I'd known them for a couple of years, there was still a lot of gaps in like what they had created and the stories that they were telling and the assumptions they were making, and was able to like go very, very deep one-on-one and say, no, actually, I think the problem that you think you're solving is not really the problem that you're solving. Like, this is what you should be communicating. And it's been really interesting because I've seen shifts in the way that they've done business. And I've actually seen both of those companies that I advise, take on actually win more business with retailers just in the past 2 or 3 months. So that's been cool.
And that's a wrap. Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. That was such a great conversation with Ernest. It was long. We went over so much that we could not fit it into one episode. We had to split it up into 2. In this episode, just to recap for everybody, we spoke about Ernest's journey from MJ BizCon to founding BIPOCANN during the pandemic. So the struggles that he went through starting his own business, particularly through the pandemic, as well as his work with Colorado's social equity program, and what he sees, the struggles he sees entrepreneurs go through, and the common mistakes that they go through when they first start their dispensary. We go through that as well. Stay tuned for next week. We talk about investments, what to put in your pitch deck for investors, the need to make things concise, as well as how many investors that you should reasonably talk to if you want to be successful. Stay tuned for that. We launch that episode next week, Tuesday at 10 a.m. And as we wrap this episode, I want to take some time to highlight some budtenders that have absolutely crushed it. I want to go over our August budtender spotlight winners. So congratulations to Alex Pinwitt, Gabrielle Hilly, Marissa Whitning, and Jan Acosta. These 4 absolutely deserve to be honored. They go above and beyond to help our customers and to share their knowledge and to make sure that customers get the product that they truly deserve. So thanks again, guys, and congratulations. If you guys have a team member that is deserving of recognition and is absolutely killing it, please nominate them. They can be featured next in a future episode. This is my favorite way of highlighting the true MVPs of our world, the people in the front lines, our budtenders who make this cannabis world go round. So again, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening to the KayaCast podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app or visit our website to access the full archive of episodes from the show.